Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Zikra Mantasha, and this is my submission for the mid test for comparative class, comparative literature class. I will be presenting about the comparative literature and decoloniality. So, comparative literature. It is tempting and surely quite right to say not only that post-colonial studies transform comparative literature, but that the later aim to change post-colonial studies as well. After 10 years of cross-fertilization, which would allow post-colonial studies to move beyond monolingualism and narrow textualism. This is the foundation of what Hassan and Saunders have done, the project of comparative postcolonialism. And yet, though postcolonial studies has embraced a broader discursive grounding, it remains predominantly monolingual in English. This explains, in part, why this chapter is titled Comparative Literature and Decoloniality and not Comparative Literature and Postcolonial Studies. So, decoloniality versus decolonization. First, I think I would like to pinpoint the definition first. Decoloniality is an uncommon word that cannot be found in an English dictionary. As a noun, the closest common word in English is decolonization, which means the withdrawal from its former colonies or of a colonial power. Decoloniality is not the same with decolonization. One has to assume on one hand that decoloniality has a different meaning from decolonization, otherwise it would be a superfluous term, and on the other hand, that it is paired with coloniality, which is its turn should differ from colonization. To fully understand decoloniality, it may be best to explore what it is not. Decoloniality is not decolonization. Decolonization refers to the physical political shift of power between colonizing powers and their soon-to-be former subject. Decoloniality, a term coined by sociologist Anibal Quijano, is a prospective stance and the proposition of thought, analysis, sense making, doing, feeling, and being that is actional in the Fanonian sense, uh, praxim- praxistemical and continuing. In other words, it is about doing or rather undoing and creating just situation where unjust one have long prevailed. It is in this sense that decoloniality can be understood as process. Decoloniality has coined by Latin American scholars from sociologists and philosophers to anthropologists, semioticians, and literary critics within the project of a critical understanding of modernity. Colonialism may be over as political order after the post 1945 decolonization. Coloniality is still active as the most widespread method of domination across our world. For Quijano, coloniality names the relationship between the European, also called Western culture, and the others, which is a relationship of colonial domination. It is therefore a colonization of the imagery of the colonized from within. Such colonization was achieved mainly through the repression of the models of knowledge and meaning by imposing the colonizer's pattern of expressions and beliefs. It includes three stages, which are the repression, which result in impossibility for the colonized to produce culture. Second, the colonizer imposed a mystified image of the pattern of knowledge and meaning, which are set apart from the colonized. Third, these patterns are later taught in a partial and selective way to some colonized in order to co-opt them onto some of the colonizer power's institution. This three-stage process resulted in the transformation of European culture into a universal cultural model, a seductive one, for it makes possible to access the power. The next one is the comparison between post-colonialism and decoloniality. One may wonder what the difference between post-colonialism and the decoloniality. Uh, the difference is perhaps one of the most noticeable one is the prefix post that complicates this matter because it implies an aftermath in two senses, temporal, as in coming after, and ideological, and in supplementing. It is the second implication which critics of the term have found contestable. If the inequities of colonial rule have not been erased, it is perhaps mature to proclaim the demise of colonialism. According to the leading decolonial thinker Walter D. Mignolo, the difference lies in that while the colonial shift is a project of delinking, postcolonialism criticism and theory is project of scholarly transformation within the academy. Delinking means to change the hegemonic ideas of what knowledge and understanding are. Consequently, what economy and politics, ethics, philosophy, technology, and the organization of society are and should be. Such a project requires, according to Mingolo, to break with Western epistemology as ruled by the theological and the ecological qualities of knowledge and understanding. To this, double-sided chronological difference should be added, for while postcolonial studies has focused on the past 3 centuries, decoloniality traces its origins back to the Christian and Castilian colonization of the America, Mignola and Clavona, which resulted in four radical changes. One is massive appropriation of land and massive exploitation of labor. Second is establishment of Christian institution to control authority. Third is control of gender and sexuality. And four, control of knowledge and subjectivity. This means that decoloniality not only proceed but more importantly made possible postcolonialism. In contrast to the usual discussion of post-colonial studies from a comparative perspective since 1990s, we have decided to explore the intersection between comparative and colonial studies. This does not imply a denial of post-colonial studies' relevance. On the contrary, post-colonial studies is embedded in decolonial studies according to Mignolo's argument that the decoloniality is not only perceived but most importantly made it possible for post-colonialism to exist. A shift from postcolonialism to decoloniality challenges the former dominant monolingualism in English, which has been instrumental for the later construction, such as global English fiction and words literature, in translation into English, but replacing one monolingualism, postcolonial English, by another monolingualism, decolonial Spanish, is a naive exercise that we do not want to repeat. And that is it for the video. Thank you for watching.